Okay guys, welcome to your next set of Cornell notes, which is dealing with Thomas Jefferson and the Louisiana Purchase. Okay, so first we need to talk about the election of 1800. This is actually the closest election in American history. Both the Democratic Republicans and the Federalists fought a long, hard campaign. Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr, who were both Democratic Republicans, tied. If you remember, we talked about how back then in presidential elections, everybody had two votes. So you had people of the same party would vote for the same two people. So what ends up happening is that you see John Adams loses and doesn't win re-election. This time, last time he barely won, this time he barely loses. But there was a tie within the Democratic Republicans. Now, initially, Aaron Burr had decided that he was going to be Jefferson's vice president, but when they tie, Aaron Burr, who's a little bit of a shady character, he says, hey, maybe I should be president. So, according to the Constitution, whenever there's a tie, the election goes to the House of Representatives. In the House of Representatives, they vote, and the House ends up choosing Thomas Jefferson by a single vote. So the tiebreaker, right, was determined by only a single vote. The closest election in American history, and probably always will be because you can't get much closer than that. Okay, and here's just a copy of the ledger of how the Electoral College voted, and you can see both Democratic Republican candidates get 73 votes, and John Adams, the Federalist, gets 65. Okay, so what is not true about the election of 1800? Was it that Adams and Jefferson tied? There was a long, hard campaign. The House of Representatives decides the winner, and one vote decided the winner. Okay, the one that's not true is actually A, because it's Aaron Burr and Jefferson, both Democratic Republicans, that end up tying, not Adams. Adams loses outright. Okay, so it's important to know, guys, what kind of person Thomas Jefferson was. What did he believe in? He really, first he's inaugurated in 1801, and he believes that the government should not waste money. They should spend a lot less than they have been. He thought that major decisions should be left up to the states and not to the central government, and he was not a fan of the Alien and Sedition Acts that John Adams and the Federalists put into place. So he just simply lets them expire and doesn't renew them. They go away, never to return. And he also believes in cutting taxes and cutting military spending. The government should not be spending money. Which one of the following was not one of Jefferson's political beliefs? Increase the military, president should make most decisions, expanded the Alien and Sedition Acts, and the government should spend less. Okay, he thought we should decrease the military, right? He thought that states should make the most decision. He ended the Alien and Sedition Acts, but he did think that the government should spend less, so the answer here is D. Okay, so Louisiana. Louisiana is not what it's known as today. Today, Louisiana is just a fairly small state bordering the Gulf of Mexico. But back then, Louisiana was this huge territory that was located in the middle of North America. Spain controlled the region for most of America's earliest history. Initially, the territory was French. After the French and Indian War, like we talked about, it went to Spain. So, in 1802, right, Spain secretly gave the territory to France. Now, it's secret, but it really was the worst kept secret in world history. Everybody knew that France had taken over this territory. Now, the United States was perfectly comfortable with having Spain at our western border because Spain wasn't overly powerful at this time. But when power changes, and now all of a sudden this territory is owned by the French, then it's a different story. France is a very strong country. It's a world power, right? Relationship with the early U.S. and France was, kind of back and forth. This was a big deal to all of a sudden have our border be with this country of France. So the French leader, Napoleon, right, is now a threat in a sense. And so Jefferson did not want this large territory located next to us. Jefferson also was very interested in the port of New Orleans, right? The city of New Orleans sits right at the mouth of the Mississippi River and where it empties out into the Gulf of Mexico. If you control that port, you basically can control everything that goes up and down that river, right? That river extends almost all the way up into Canada. So it's a very strategic, very important city because you can control, right, that major highway of shipping goods in the middle part of the continent just from controlling that one city. So if you look, here is the city of, here is what is now currently the United States. Well, when the territory of Louisiana that we're talking about, right, is really, let's see, this area here. So it's a very, very large kind of area that the U.S. was interested in purchasing, okay? So this area here, it's a big, big piece of land. So the U.S. really wanted not to have France control this land, but really to have it either maybe be back with Spain, maybe we can control it. But the only thing that we were really interested in was the city of New Orleans, which is located right about here, right? That's a big dot, but it's located there. Okay, so Jefferson sends an aide to France to offer them about $10 million just to buy the city of New Orleans. So Napoleon instead, right, because of the Haitian Revolution, right, he needs that territory, right, to feed the slaves in Haiti, which now he doesn't need that, right, because the slaves in Haiti have revolted. So he wants to get rid of that whole land. He needs money. So he offers the territory of Louisiana to the United States for $15 million. So instead of paying 10 for one city, he says, what if we sell you the whole thing for 15? So this is a huge deal. It's the best real estate deal in history. But Jefferson is reluctant because, well, he believes in spending less money, right? And he believes in following the Constitution. There's nothing in the Constitution that says anything about the president having the authority to add territory to the country. So he signs the treaty in 1803, right, making this a new addition to the country, but he's worried, right? He kind of makes him feel uneasy because it's not really what he's all about. So he really questions, right, is this legal for me to do this? Now, who do we buy the Louisiana Purchase from? Was it France, Spain, Great Britain, or was it Mexico? Okay, and as we said, Spain had controlled it for a while, but it was the French that we ended up buying it from. Okay, so here's a map, guys, that really tells us what exactly the Louisiana Purchase looked like, right? It basically doubles the size of the country. Pretty significant piece of land. And as you can see here, it really stretches, right? It stretches from the Gulf of Mexico down here to the Canadian border here, right? The Mississippi River here to the Rocky Mountains here, right? So it's a very widespread territory. Okay, Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains, from the Gulf of Mexico to British-controlled Canada. Okay, now Jefferson eventually sends a team, and this team is led by two individuals named Lewis and Clark to explore this unknown region. Now, they leave St. Louis in 18 months. It takes them to reach the Pacific Ocean at the mouth of the Columbia River. The pair kept journals documenting what they saw, which we will look at in class. Okay, so today the area of the Louisiana Territory makes up 15 states. Okay, so we have Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Iowa, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, right? So all of these areas are made up of what was the Louisiana Purchase. Very significant piece of American history here. So what is not true about the Louisiana Purchase? The U.S. wanted to join New Orleans. Jefferson didn't hesitate to sign the treaty. It doubled the size of the United States, or it cost the U.S. $15 million. Okay, as you know, this first one here is true, and Jefferson didn't hesitate to sign the treaty. That is the one that is not true, right? Because he did question how legal it was. Okay, here's a quick
Now
video.
for another 60-second history report.
Think you're a good shopper? Well, maybe not as good as Thomas Jefferson did. Back in 1803, a large part of what we now call the Pacific Northwest was controlled by France. And their leader, Napoleon, needed funds to build up his navy. The solution? Louisiana Purchase. President Jefferson spent $15 million and got 530 million acres.
Thank you so much.
He doubled the size of the U.S. for about 4 cents an acre. He then sent Lewis and Clark to survey Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. These two led an expedition to explore this new land. They might not have made it through the first winter, though, if it wasn't for the help from a French trapper named Cornell and his wife, Sacagawea.
Hello.
Sacagawea, a member of the Shoshone tribe, kept the crew fed, served as translator, and even had a baby during the trek. She is now featured on the $1 coin. So here it is in a nutshell. Napoleon needed money. Jefferson got a steal of a deal. The country grew, we sent two, a Shoshone gal saved the day, and she earned $1 along the way.
That's the Louisiana Purchase in 60 seconds.
Okay, so Jefferson's presidency eventually comes to an end after 2 terms, right? So he does win re-election, unlike his predecessor Adams does. Although much of the nation looked to him as a hero, Jefferson looks at his own presidency as a failure because he really went against a lot of his own personal beliefs at the time he was in office. He even leaves the fact that he was president off of his tombstone. He wants to be known as the signer of this person who wrote the Declaration of Independence, right? The person who wrote the Statute of Virginia, okay, and the founder of the University of Virginia. He does not want to be remembered as the 3rd president. Okay, so what does Jefferson leave off his tombstone? The fact that he was president of the United States. Okay, and don't forget, fill out your reflection and your margins with main ideas, keywords, guiding questions, or pictures.